right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the New Columbian Movement YouTube channel. You guys know me. My name is Sean. Today we're sitting down here at our little Friendsgiving, thanks to our gracious host over here in Long Beach Island, New Jersey. Having a great time at another one of our chapter meetups. We got some guys here from the Northeast chapter. We got some guys here from the Southeast chapter, and we've got some friends from the pilgrimage who are here as well. And today we're going to continue with the theme of our Fireside chats. So the last meetup that we had, which was in Tafton, Pennsylvania, there on the lake out in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, we had another one of these Fireside chats, and I think this is a really fun theme to keep going, where we can kind of sit around the campfire, if you will, even though we're being Zoomers and we're doing it digitally this time because we don't have a campfire and it's rainy outside. But this is a good way for us to kind of talk about some things that are topical in our day, in our present time, especially that is relevant to an organization like ours and what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. And you get to hear everybody's perspectives because you can, hear me, or you can hear other internet personalities talk about things from their perspective. But what does that mean when we're talking about a group of people who are coordinating together to make efforts towards accomplishing a certain goal, which is effectively what we're here for at the end of the day. Even though we're having fraternal events, we're all working towards a common goal. What are our thought process? And that's what we're here about today. So we were discussing a little bit about what do we want this topic to be about, right? What is something that's important? Last time we had one of these fireside chats, we were talking about the importance of fraternity. And I think we hit on a lot of good points. So some of us who are here today were here for that last time. We hit on a lot of good points about on the importance of fraternity and having a fraternity present and something that we can fall back on in order to help project these types of things that we want to project into the culture and into the world, right? We were talking about this today, and we were talking about the military and how the degradation of the fraternity that used to exist in the military, we kind of have to rebuild that up. And that's great, and that's what we're doing here right now, having these conversations. But what do you build that foundation off of? What is the importance of fraternity if it's going to be based on nothing, right? Or if it's based on some loose affiliation with, like, what do you see on college campuses all the time, the college fraternities and stuff like that. So what do we base this fraternity on? As a Christian nationalist movement, I think it's fairly obvious that we're basing it on something very particular, which is putting Christ first. And so when we were having this discussion, what are we going to have our fireside chat talk about tonight? It was, well, let's talk about putting Christ first, because that's what it all comes down to. At the end of the day, this is about a movement that is trying to reinstitute Christ as the king and put him first, both in our personal lives, which is always going to be an everyday struggle as sinners, as we all know that all too well, but in the culture as well, and the political sphere. So how are we effectively branding ourselves as a Christ first individual, and then how are we pushing that out into society at large? So, I'll open up the floor to you guys at this point. What do you think are some good examples that we've seen so far as like Christ first branding culturally? And then we can get into the personal stuff too. But what do you think is being effective right now, I guess, is the better question about bringing Christ into the culture?
I think real quick you just plug like the growth of Latin Mass within this recent decade. Because I remember talking like, old heads of like local parishes, like maybe like a decade ago, like Latin Mass, like parishes, it was all like very like kind of like outsider type people, it was very like, I don't know how to describe, like very like unfriendly outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
But now like you go around like Latin Mass parishes, they're just exploding out the door. Just people on people on people,
mm-hmm.
like different mass times and all that. I think that's like the return to tradition in the Catholic Church is very much like a strong like subculture that's growing right now. That's especially being espoused like online as like more and more people come to like a traditional worldview, understanding, get alignment with like their cosmos, so to speak.
Yeah, and for the context, the Latin Mass essentially in the Catholic Church, for those who are not going to be as familiar with that, is effectively the traditionalist movement in the church, which is really just like, like the phrase goes, like a return to tradition, because that's kind of what the Catholic Church has always been rooted in, is the Latin Mass. Things only changed in the 70s. A lot of things changed in the 70s, but unique to the Catholic Church, that was one of them, is kind of the new establishment of this Novus Ordo Mass, and the fruits of that has been kind of obvious as we've seen a decline in vocations in the church. We've seen a decline in mass attendance, a decline in young people. I mean, one of the conversations we were having today was like, where do you see all the young people in the church today? Because it's not at these Novus Ordo parishes. I mean, the average age there means that church is probably going to be shut down in 10 to 20 years because it's just so sparse in the first place. And then the people who are occupying these pews in these churches are very old. And it's kind of that boomer community gathering type church, you know what I'm saying? Where, yeah, they're there for like something that's probably been a part of their lives since they were kids, but are they there for something more than that? Not necessarily. And it's certainly not something that's going to draw young people into the church.
Yeah, it's like the degradation, like the abuses that aroused out of like the 1970s. It's just like like Shia LaBeouf like said it. It's like you just can't take it like it does not have like the respect due.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sacrifice of the mass, like the true like transubstantiation of our Lord throughout every mass, every day. Like that's not respected enough in these post 1970s masses. And I think people can see that with the respect of the altar rails, of the ad orientem, of just not even no popular language at all, except like if the priest chooses to do missal, gospel, and sermon in a native tongue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very much. It's not towards you. The mass is a sacrifice of Calvary for God.
Yeah. And then, you know, the Novus Ordo is really just a way to get more of the world with extra steps. Just one of the things I like to say a lot. It's like, why would you expect young people to be attracted to, and I don't even want to just like single out Novus Ordo, but more so parishes that don't take their faith seriously, or that emphasize embracing the world over embracing church history and church teaching. Because you can technically get that anywhere, though it just so happens to manifest itself these days more often in the very lukewarm Novus Ordo type parishes. But why would that be attractive to young people? Because you can get the world at the snap of a finger, right? Pretty instantaneously. I mean, most of the modern world is structured around getting whatever vice you need as quickly as possible. And the modern church, holistically the modern church, and in this you find this in Catholicism, you find this in Protestantism, and probably in Orthodoxy too, is giving you a little bit less of that instantaneous world with some extra steps. And so people who are going through crisis in their lives and they're looking for the truth, because ultimately that's what it all comes down to, is we're all looking for truth somewhere. We're trying, or we're either burying the fact that we're not being satiated because we haven't found the truth, we're burying ourselves in our vices, or we're genuinely searching for truth. And you walk into
truth or meaning,
purpose, right? Ultimately aligning ourselves to Creator, to God. We're walking into Pastor Jim's, Sunday Bible study, or a Novus Ordo Catholic church where the priest tells you, hey, enjoy the football games after Mass because his priorities are misaligned. They're not finding truth there. They're not finding meaning. They're not finding purpose.
Yeah. What I think is interesting about, especially about this generation, it's easy to, just point fingers and say, wow, this generation of young people is they're just not doing enough, or, they're doing so much wrong. But I think one thing about the generation is they have a keen sense of, feeling, or they can understand things. So you don't have to have a 200 IQ to figure out, there can be something more to life. I can look at my past, the generations, the people around me, I can see that, they aren't happy, and I don't want to do what they're doing either, because I'm not going to be happy, because I can see that there's not a lot of happiness around. And so there's, really no, political solution. There's no, Republican parties that, there's no great candidate that's going to achieve this, So that just brings a lot of people to church, I think, especially young people, because they can see such a strong absence in their life,
Mm-hmm.
and just time over time, nothing's adding up. And I think that's a good thing, because it's hit or miss. Instead of a small group of people, there's probably a pretty good chance that people are going to start just going to church because they want that meaning, because they feel that absence really strongly,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to send them to church.
we were having this discussion in the car that there is no such thing as a society without religion.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, we have a secular society, a society that does not profess any religion. However, itself has become a religion.
Mm-hmm.
It is a religion of materialism. And once you realize that is extremely hollow. So you can have, all these material goods. You can make yourself your own God. You can have a culture or have a society that's based around you specifically and the sort of, embodiment of man. However, what secularism has removed when compared to, other errors in the past, other spiritual errors, is the fact that it is purely material. There is no spirituality to it. I mean, you can see this now. You can see with, the amount of teenagers embracing things like tarot cards and crystals and these, occultic practices. And you can demonstrably see that people are desiring that sort of spiritual need. Mm. However, also, this is also a double-sided coin. It can be, you can see people embrace error. You can have people, reject modernity, obviously, but you can have people, in response to modernity, embrace error. Mm-hmm. Now, as C.S. Lewis says it obviously, that the devil presents two errors in the world, and we're too busy.
Errors in pairs,
errors in pairs, and we're too busy fighting amongst each other. What's the slightly less worse error, in order to to ignore us from the truth. And this can be seen a lot. I believe a lot of right wing communities do need some sort of what's the proper word? Self-reflection, I think, would be the good term, because there's a lot of esotericism that's steeped, because we have one side of the coin, which is, liberal white women, doing crystals and tarot cards and using Ouija boards. But on the other side, we have people becoming Salafists and people, worshiping dead gods from the Norse and Greek pantheons and embracing these crazy ideas like Agartha and ice walls. But what we need to understand is that that's not truth. It could be, quote unquote, based. It could be funny to joke about, but it's not truth. There's only one truth, and there's only one thing you should be basing culture around, and that's Christ.
That's a good point. Going back to how do we put Christ first, one key issue to address in making that happen is to address the crisis of a lack of fathers in society. Since we see that authority has been challenged in the modern world, there's very much a lack of fatherhood or fathers in general. So there was no coincidence when last year, was it that it was named the year of Saint Joseph? Was it?
Yeah.
That's for a reason. So many people don't have father figures, or they're raised in a culture where they are taught to disenfranchise their father. So in their beliefs, the father has no weight, no authority. Mm-hmm. So when to deprogram yourself from that kind of mentality or that situation or that trauma that a person may have experienced, I think it's important to be humble enough to seek the roles of fatherhood in life that can help put Christ first in one's life. Mm-hmm. When you're able to embody those values and give value to fatherhood, I think, and that is a crisis that exists in our society today.
Definitely, I agree, and I would say that even if say there's a single mom that got divorced or a widower that their husband died, and then they have children and they don't have that father figure anymore. Putting Christ first, at least they don't have a father anymore, but they could look to the Lord, our Father, and they still have a father, and they could have that person be in their life for
one. To continue on that,
right.
It's something that I've read in studies, and we've spoken on this before, that it's always the father who has more influence on creating the pattern in their offspring of values and virtues and habit. So if the father is someone who puts Christ first in their life, or there is a father figure that puts Christ first in their life, that will influence and imprint on the offspring, mm-hmm. on the children, and on the next generation.
Well, fatherhood is when you talk about the principle of subsidiarity, father is the first leader, both for the wife and the family, the kids as well. So what they're doing is they're breaking down the structure of subsidiarity, and they're ceding the authority of the father and the husband to the state. And of course, the state is not acting in a moral sense either.
I also think, to expand on that, we're not just suffering a lack of father figures, we're suffering a lack of family units entirely. You know, because let's look at the modern family, the one that really exists nowadays. We have typically both mother and father that work, you know, with like 60-hour shifts both just to support their family. Their children are being raised by the state either in public schooling or through some other means. And there's no family. There's only, you know, units of people, and the sort of dehumanization that has occurred in the lack of a Christian culture. There needs to be structure, because obviously sons need their fathers, but so do their daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Daughters need their fathers. Sons need their mothers. Daughters need their mothers. This is a very simple thing. There needs to be a family unit. Society is built on the precipice of hierarchy, with the man at the top and the family unit beneath him. And that's not a bad thing. You know, people want to make that out to be a bad thing. As the modern feminist movements have taught us over the last 50 years, that you need to go and work a job you hate so you can advance your career, and you need to let your eggs die or whatever, and
be alone at age 30.
Yeah, be alone at age 30. Have 20 different cats. Go have sex every 2 days. It's like that's what we're taught. Women are taught that, and we were talking about this in the car on the way here. Men are inherently taught to be hyper feminine, and women are inherently taught to be hyper masculine. And in the end, what it creates is not this sort of utopia that that liberals and communists want to make it out to be. What it's created is disorder,
chaos.
And when you have a family unit that is in the basis of disorder, there is nothing. The family unit, alongside religion, is inherently the structure of society. Mm-hmm. When the family unit fails, society as a whole fails. Mm-hmm. There have been attempts to subvert it, and every single time it's failed, and for good reason.
Just like piggyback off that is there's three enemies that every Christian has to deal with. It's the world, the flesh, and the devil. And the worst of the three is the flesh, because that is the only thing that you have control over. You'll never you can look at all the errors of the world, like mass abortion, like all the birth control, and it's very easy for Christians and conservatives to fall in the trap of we need to do something about the world. I want to change the entire world, but the point of following Christ is, have you conquered yourself? Mm-hmm. Have you mastered every part and every aspect of your life, from hunger to chastity? I mean, discipline and chastity. Can you control gossiping? Do you gossip? Do you slander people? To so many levels. You need to master yourself, and if you can do that, you forget about conquering the world, conquering the devil, because you've done the impossible. That's the hardest mission.
Yeah.
I do think. Sorry for interrupting, but I do think a lot of people are too focused on the sort of, I'm not going to call it LARPy because I don't think that's the right word, but there's really no other word I can really think to use it, where it's everybody wants to be, a Caesar. But no one really has, from my experience, at least from seeing some people, the people that want to be a Caesar really shouldn't be a Caesar. It's, some of these people, they can barely control themselves. How are they expected to control a world? That's my question. It's just, so we need to focus firstly. This does not mean that we ignore everything that we do. We shouldn't just solely focus on ourselves, but inherently it's a multiple battle. It's a multiple front battle. Where in a sense is, if you are not organizing yourself, think of it what's a good comparison I can give to it? Think of it like a combat unit. If the unit is disorganized and it attacks an enemy, it loses. The disorganized enemy will always lose to someone that is organized.
Well, that was the thing we were talking about with, which maybe it's a topic we'll touch on at the end, but the Yay thing, when they were in the interview with Tim Pool, and Tim Pool was coming out, and he just consistently continued to reinforce the fact that he's like, oh, I don't believe in identitarianism. I don't believe in identitarianism. I don't believe in it. I don't think it has a place. It's that's great. Nobody cares if you don't believe in identitarianism, because the enemies of the world, the enemies of Christ, do. I'm not implicitly referring to any one person, group, seriously. But anybody, any force of evil is necessarily going to be coordinated to impose its values. And so, the military example that you were given there, I think is a conversation we were having, which is that, basically this whole idea of, not being identitarian, not identifying ourselves as a Christian bloc against the world, or, being part of the whole spiritual system that God has gifted us, the church, and not saying this is our weapon, this is our army against what the devil has brought to bear on us is a huge issue, because essentially this whole idea that we shouldn't be this individualistic sense of like there is no identitarianism, there's no point in being, identifying as a group or a clique or a tribe for any of this, is basically handing all of us a sword and sending us off in different directions as a cohort of Roman legions march directly at us. And that's why the Roman legions, you want to give a historical example, were so successful against the barbarian tribes, is because of that cohesion, that unit that they were able to bring to bear in the fight, that we are not doing right now. That's an issue. We're not bringing that cohort of Christ first to the world.
And the thing is, the enemy wants us to be disorganized. That's as simple as it is. That's why I'm not sure that Tim Pool is a very good actor, where it's, you have, because with the world, with the globalists, if you want to call them that, what they want is that they want everyone single people to have no identity besides themselves. They have all the identity. They can have their, their own tradition, but you can't have anything. You need to be a part of this, I believe you were talking about the Borg, as it will. You need to be a part of this sort of homogenous Borg.
The endless, fourth estate, the masses.
Yeah, the masses.
The teeming hive.
You have to just, constantly consume. You have to, watch porn, play video games for 12 hours a day.
Consume media.
Get excited for next product. That's what they want. They don't want you to have a culture that's based around Christianity. They don't want you to have a culture that's based around truth, virtue. They don't want that. Mm-hmm. They want you to be a slave to your own passions and to your own sin.
And I think sacrifice is the key word too. Is Christ is sacrifice in so many levels of the word, but the consumer is how you were describing, there's no sacrifice. It's self-centered, and Christ is just he's the pinnacle of masculinity. He is the man. He's Eche Homo. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If society isn't putting Christ first right now in the modern times, what are they trying to put first?
Right.
In my 3 things I can think of right now that could be possible that they're trying to push first would be yourself, money, or say sex. Are those things that
consumerism
should be should that be put first?
Those have never made anyone happy before.
Friedrich Nietzsche, who I really don't necessarily agree with on a lot of things, I do think he did make a very good point in the idea of the last man. The last man is this sort of pacifistically, nihilistic, never doesn't want anything, always, wants just comfort, doesn't want to, risk himself for anything. Now, obviously, in Nietzsche's context, he was talking about something that was obviously very negative to Christianity, but I do think he makes a very good point here in the sense that we have a society of last men, of people who want nothing else other than comfort, material pleasure, no spiritual, no physical exertion or sacrifice. That's inherently what we have, and we have a society that is led by these people.
Right. Then those values that these people are trying to instill, these inglorious values, is going to, what it's causing is a destruction of Western society as we know it, traditional Western values. One thing about that is that to destroy traditional Western values, it doesn't go out with a bang. It goes out with a whimper. So sometimes we like to portray there's a huge boogeyman out there to get us, and that's not necessarily the truth. That's going to destroy us or take everything away. That's not necessarily what's going on. When I say it goes out with a whimper, it is that the cultural decay is such that it is the Western tradition or is destroyed by the cowardice of not being able to understand it or follow it because we've been led so astray. So it doesn't go out with a war or a big bang, but it goes through with a whimper by way of degeneracy.
Yeah. And I think the fact of the matter is too is that the situation, we deserve it. Either us and our ancestors, the priesthood. So everyone messed up. We deserve this. You deserve the situation you're in. Mm-hmm. You were born at a set time and place. You deserve this. We have original sin from Adam. You're now in the modern world. You deserve this. What are you doing about it? Do you go to Mass regularly? Do you go to confession? Do you fast? How long do you pray each day? You know, do you have vices? What are you doing yourself to make yourself pleasing to God? You know, like you can't just LARP like I'm fighting back. You know, but without doing the spiritual exercises and aligning your will with Christ. Do you fast? What kind of fast do you do? Do you pray your rosary every day? If you don't pray your rosary every day, this is a threat. I challenge you.
Whoa, future Taylor Marshall. More based.
Consecration to Mary.
Yeah, you should consecrate yourself to Mary. You should use the St. Louis de Montfort 33-day consecration. Our group, that is a requirement to join. You have to go through it.
Because the point of a mother is to reveal the Father. So Mary's role is to bring us to the Father.
The Madonna is the Eastern Gate. The Ark of the Covenant.
Which is apparently in Ethiopia, as I discovered today.
Let's keep going with that. What you can do in your daily life, because those are excellent habits. Everyone should do those. Think about all the greatest material things that have been created in the entire world.
Yeah.
All of them were for the greater glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest composer of all time is Bach, and it was not me who said that, although I agree with it. It's been ranked in terms of the complexity and the beauty that, and I'll touch more on this later. We don't recognize beauty as much as we should. He was an extremely devout man. He raised a huge family. He didn't make that much money. He wrote a lot of his music and just gave it away. But it's incredibly beautiful music. You look at the architecture around medieval churches. These are the most beautiful architectural, even the drawings themselves, but the buildings are incredible. The complexity. They took more than a century to build some of these things. And most of the labor was volunteer labor. It was like, I'm a craftsman, I'm a mason. That's not that kind of mason, an actual mason. They would come and just donate weeks of their time and material, right? To just, I want to be a part of this. And it was all because they were Christ first. That was their orientation. They wanted it for the glory of God, not for their own glory. C.S. Lewis, you mentioned him, one of the great writers of the modern world. A little bit of a shallow pool, I guess, but between him and Tolkien, you've got two of the best fantasy writers that ever lived. And his expositions, Mere Christianity is an incredible exposition. To be honest with you, that actually, drew me back to the fold, and that I've been a devout Catholic ever since I read that a few years ago, even though I was raised Catholic. So anything like that, whenever you're about to embark on a piece of work, you can devote what you're about to do to God, and He's going to come into you, and the more you do that, the more He's going to come into you, and opening those pathways. Look at my altar wall. Mary is front and center. I've got that. So coming to Jesus through Mary is also inspiring. Just something that you can always think about is what is good, beautiful, and true. And now the other thing I would like to say is that because the consumerism and the material nature of the world, they're trying to beat that out of us, and we don't have mental hygiene about what is beautiful. Right? So exposing yourselves to these types of things is another way to become Christ-oriented. Listen to Bach. Don't listen to whatever nonsense is available out there right now.
Going back to what you said earlier about obviously music and the buildings of the the medieval ages, you can see that the way the music is created and the way the buildings are built, they're building towards something. They're creating things towards something. Obviously something that's greater than every single person here. However, what you see in the modern world, you see buildings that are drab, boring, plain. You can drive by, any store center and see the same lines of 4 gray buildings. Maybe sometimes if there's a Target, there'll be like a red, panel.
The oppression.
There's like there's some red, there's some like red balls outside the store. Maybe that. Maybe you get that. And with the music, you see, the same hyper consumerist garbage, but it's obviously even more deadly because you have music that's about taking drugs, killing people, doing all these obviously sinful and egregious behavior, and that's because that's what our society reflects. Culture is inherently reflects.
Well, what's even funnier is that every major hip hop artist there are a select like group of maybe like a half a dozen like songwriters that write their songs. They don't write their own songs. Drake doesn't write his own songs. Gucci Mane, he might, but people egg him on and tell him what to put in his lyrics. There's literally a group of like 6 people that write all these songs.
And they all have very similar last names.
It's literally like 6 people. They do all this.
And then it's also based on like almost an algorithm now, to where like there's a certain like rhythm that aligns with, I don't know, the human heartbeat or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And it's all the megahertz are off.
Yeah.
They're actually designed to make you more anxious.
Yeah. So it's, and you know, a certain individual has been talking about the problems in the music industry lately. But you know, getting back to what you were saying, is like some of the greatest creators in the world have dedicated themselves to something greater than themselves. And when you were talking about dedicating ourselves, whatever the task is, whether it's getting up and making breakfast, going to work, doing some sort of charity in our daily life, going to church, confession, whatever it is, we ought to be dedicating that thing that we're doing in the moment to Christ. Not because we have some like vain aspiration that we want to achieve something great in this world for ourselves, because then you're orienting yourself completely in the wrong way, and you're probably not going to accomplish what you're setting out to accomplish because you're completely misoriented. But because he deserves that, because he is. And you know, I think is it a fair statement to say that like, in order to make a Christ first nation, we have to make ourselves Christ first? Because as you were saying, the nation is a reflection of the people that kind of compose it, the citizenry, the body of the individuals, and the moral health of that nation. And that's going to be a challenge. And it means that people like us and other people who aren't here in the room with us that identify with us, people who are watching, other people are part of our organization, your organization, it means that we have the moral imperative and the moral responsibility to make those extra sacrifices, because we are explicitly aware of the situation and we have the capacity and the capabilities to act. And if we don't, that's going to be a tough bullet to bite when you're standing at the gates and, you know, receiving your judgment. You say, you sat around in a room in Long Beach Island, New Jersey, and properly identified all the problems that are going on in the world. And then the next day you went back to your life and you chose not to do something about it. Even though I equipped you with the capacity to be a leader in society or to be a leader in your family, all you had to do was ask for the grace to do it.
I will reiterate that there are no more messiahs or saviors. There's only one Messiah, one Savior, which is Jesus Christ, our Lord. When we look at the media, and when we look at different personalities and figures in the media, such as politicians, singers, rappers, social media influencers, etc., we shouldn't be swept away by movements or ideas or ideologies that are going to take us away from being Christ-centered. Christ is King, ultimately, and there will be no more messiahs or saviors that are going to come and save us and fix the day. This is very much a cultural problem that we must take upon ourselves, one person at a time, and this is how we will turn the tide to restoration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the no savior piece, it's like so much of the modern world is centered around the fact that we have this superiority complex within our own hearts and our own minds. We are the ends and we are the means in our satisfaction and our comfort and all these types of things. And so, you know, to be a hero today ultimately comes down to being humble enough to submit to the true authority, which is God, and his presence in our lives and his mission for us.
And it's easy to really attach yourself to, for example, like Donald Trump or, you know, a variety of political figures or media figures. It's easy to attach yourself to those and think that if you just follow them, that all your problems are going to be solved. We're going to have, you know, the society we always wanted. We're going to have the lives we always wanted. But simply put, it's not true. And I think a big reason why people do that is because it's easy. You know, there is no real commitment to, you know, following Donald Trump. You can just, you know, post on the internet about it, you know, put up a sign, wear a MAGA hat, whatever, and there's no real commitment to it. But with Christ, there's commitment. You must follow his commandments. You must follow his laws. You must embrace his holy church, fundamentally, first and foremost. And some people don't want that. some people will willingly choose something that's easier because it's more easy for them to comprehend, more easy for them to practice, more easy for them to understand. But in the end, it's a mystery. It's something that we all have to follow, and I've come, a very long way from when I reverted, and I'm still going.
There was somebody who once said something. Can't remember who it was attributed to. It might have been reiterated by a couple different people, a couple different flavors. But one of the white pills about the current state of affairs in our world and the present in which we exist is how fortunate we are that the lines are drawn so clearly, and the differentiation between right and wrong has never been so present as it is right now. When you look at the kind of cultural things that we're combating on a daily basis, abortion, transgenderism, that all we have to do is really just accept the fact that we have to act and then act. It's not a matter of trying to discover right from wrong. It's present. It's obvious in our lives. We know which direction we have to go. All we have to do is stand up and do it and act. And this is a struggle. We talked about this, you guys weren't here for it, but we talked about this in the fraternity video too, how difficult it is, even for people in this sphere, to get them motivated to do these types of things. But as you guys were tapping into earlier, if you want to change the world, you have to change yourself. And that's a fun little cutesy thing to say sometimes, and it's much more difficult to put that into action. But if we want to change the world, we have to change ourselves, and that's not nearly as sexy as saying, we can pick up the sword and charge headfirst into the fray and take down, the apparatus that is the current web of bureaucracy that imposes so much hardships on our lives. Everybody wants to do that. That's not necessarily what we're called to do. Very few of us are called to do that. We're called to act according to our own purpose and living a holy life. And when we change ourselves, we change the world. So on that piece, I want to go around and I'll give everybody here an opportunity. I've already said my piece. Jeff, we'll start with you. If you all could pick one thing, the topic today was putting Christ first. What is one thing that you can either institute on a personal level, or maybe on a cultural level, as an individual or as a group, that brings us closer to putting Christ first in our lives in this society?
Daily, regular prayer at specific hours, 6 a.m., 9, noon, 3, 6, 9. Hit those prayer points every day, and to the extent that you can within the work that you might be doing, but as much as possible, make that the primary way of scheduling your day. So that's the most important thing you do, and then structure your day around that.
Well, I think our Lord says it best: pick up your cross and follow me. We must all, I think, pride is probably one of the biggest issues amongst everybody here, is that we all need to have self-reflection. We all need to be humble. We all need to understand our position and understand that you're never going to really be ideal. Nothing is ever going to be ideal. Obviously, the thing is, it's never about being ideal. It's about striving towards what is ideal. And we will be justified in the end if we continue to struggle. So I believe the best thing we can do is just, pick up your cross and follow him. You can do all these things. You can make your, internet memes or whatever, make your jokes, make, your long Twitter threads or whatever. It doesn't matter, because if you're losing the point of why you're doing these things in the first place, then everything you're doing is moot. C.S. Lewis said that if one who has his faith in pride, his faith is in vain.
I would say to put Christ first. Nowadays, it's especially important to think about what Ronald was saying, and just make sure you're not following like false gods. You're not having too many things in your head at the same time. Just keep the focus on God and not politics or cultural issues or family issues or whatever's going on. Just make sure that you have the priorities in line and you know what comes first, and then to worry about the other stuff after that.
I think the biggest step you could take in your personal prayer life is to get a spiritual director. You should have someone, a priest. Don't be like a normie. Guess who's not a priest? Get a priest to discuss with you where you are spiritually, what you should do, set a regimen for you, and then meet up with at set periods of time in order to grow spiritually. Like, I've done this past year, my life has improved immensely. You know, another thing too, I'm gonna plug really quick, because my home parish, this is the epicenter of one of the epicenters of the scapular apostate, is that you should wear the brown scapular. As a matter of fact, you should wear this. You should also pray the rosary every day. These two things are key. I think it was the apparition of, which one? Lourdes, Fatima?
I can't remember.
I forget which
It's
apparition.
probably Fatima, if I'm thinking
I
correctly.
think it was Fatima.
I don't know.
But Our Lady said the scapular and the rosary, if I'm quoting correctly.
I will conquer the world. I will conquer the world with the rosary and the scapular.
Yes. And then I guess to discuss, like, we're not in New Columbian movement. We're from a local traditional men's Catholic fraternity in a certain location, but that we're purely regional. We've no real online presence. It's not like Anon or anything like that. And I've got to say that another thing too is you should organize in real life. Like, I grew up online, like XYZ, yada yada. Like, you should be organizing in real life. Like, we had like a parish men's meeting. Our leader literally walked in and said, "I'm forming a group of young men in a traditionally minded, masculine fraternity." And that's how it started. And from there, we train all the time. Like, we used to meet up regularly in the winter. Last winter, we'd box in a parking garage. That was our thing. We literally boxed in a parking garage outside like a gym. And eventually, people just kept flocking to us. We had infantry commanders. We had like semi-pro football players. We were getting in like black belt, like BJJ guys that actually wanted to come out and train with us. The fact of the matter is, it's literally just touch grass. Like, go outside. Like, as much as like that's like a meme, the fact of the matter is you have to go out and actively create what you want to see. Like, you have to start the world. You have to go out and make what you want.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say like to really like starting to put Christ first. I mean, is obedience, because obedience is the one thing that Satan can't imitate. I mean, like, he's not human. Like, he's more chaste than all of us. You know what I'm saying? Like he just can't imitate obedience, and that's something that if you want to be, we're all human, but if you want to elevate your status like Christ did, it has to be done obedience, because Christ was obedient until death. And I mean, if we want to rise with the resurrection and glory of Christ, like, we're going to have to die with Christ, and that's obedience. And it's not obedience to your own will; it's obedience to God's. Because if you're obedient to your own desires, you're not going to succeed, and you're going to die, and you're going to be alone. You're going to feel alone. So obedience is how you put Christ first, and you're obedient by praying the rosary daily, by going to Mass Sunday, keeping the precepts of the church, attending all the holy days of obligation at a minimum, praying 15 minutes a day minimum.
Obligatory.
Yeah, obligatory. And if you fail to do those things, it's obligatory to confess them and then get back on the boat. So obedience is absolutely important and probably the most underrated Christian virtue.
Give God the Father his rightful place as Godhead, and join Christ, our Lord, in his sonship.
In the infantry, there was this concept about fire and maneuver, which is kind of the backbone of small unit infantry tactics. And the way they described it was that fire without maneuver is a waste of ammunition, and maneuver without fire is suicide. And I apply that to the spiritual life, and I like to look at prayer and works, faith and works, And you can have that same concept as faith without works is a waste of ammunition, and works without faith is suicide. And I think we really need. There's a good, healthy. I mean, we're spiritually deficient as a world in general, but I mean, in the trad spheres, if you will, there is a healthy level of spiritual recognition of who we are and who we answer to. We really, really need to impose that onto the world, because the enemy has no quarrels or qualms about making sure that we know that they are making every level effort to impose that on us. And if we're not pushing back with the same fortitude that they are, then we're abdicating the moral responsibility that we have to ensure that the world receives the same message that we've received. And that's for the sake of saving souls, and that's for the sake of just acting in a good moral capacity as a Christian ought to. And whether that means, we turn the tides by restoring Christianity and Christian moral principles as the pillar of this nation and other nations around the world, or that means we end up a martyr at some point in the future facing the wall, as they cock the rifles. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know what truth is, and we have to be willing to make material sacrifices now. And it was another thing that they talk about in the infantry is train like you fight. If you're not willing to put in the efforts now when you can still retreat into a relative comfort, I mean, we're relatively comfortable here now, then how can you expect that you're going to be willing to stand in front of the firing line and die for your faith if you literally won't get up and go do the simplest things now against some of the greatest evils that we've ever borne witness to? Get out there and actually prove that you believe what you say you believe. That's what I want to see more of. So, and it doesn't mean you can't have fun while you're doing it, because we have the truth, and we have the ultimate joy, which is Christ and His presence, and we can have some serious conversations, which can get pretty intense. But at the end of the day, there's a real joy. Like you guys were talking about, your lives have turned around and your commitments to that. So have fun with it, and spread that joy around the world. And speaking of having fun with it, we agreed that we were going to do one more little quick roundtable, and that is the fun little news piece that has come about recently, which is Ye and his net and Yahoos. So, Ye, in the future of Ye, president or emperor? No, that's not the question. But what do we kind of make of Ye? Because I'm genuinely curious. Just give like a 30-second spiel on what you think. And we'll go in the opposite direction, so I'll let Ruben go first.
It's anyone's guess what's going to happen next. So it's best to put everything in the hands of the Lord and take one step at a time and take it as each step is the destination. So whatever comes next, just act in good faith. Do what you're supposed to do, like everything we spoke of before. And God will show you the path. But in terms of everything that's happening politically, especially now, this news with Ye, I'm not with him. I'm not against him. I just feel that God can use anybody for God's means. And if the statements that Ye said are going to wake up people, then be it. Blessed be the Lord. That's it.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good response. I'm not really super keen on all I'm not up to date necessarily with everything, but I would just say exactly what he just said. But I don't really have a dog in the fight. Like my dogs just aren't in this fight. But yeah, I guess I'll just listen to the barking. I guess.
I think the biggest thing to come out of this is that he just threw a bowling ball through the overturned window. This is all mainstream now, so it's very interesting to see how it's going to proceed.
Yeah, I've been following along with all the stuff that's been happening with Ye the last probably month, it seems like at this point. I've definitely have liked him, not like a Stan fan, a Kanye Stan or whatever, but I've always respected him and I guess admired him. I've respected him for what he's done and just the person that he is carried himself with. Everybody, I'm kind of young, but since I was in middle school, people have been saying he's crazy, he's mentally insane, don't listen to him. No, I never saw that. Like, I like to listen. Like, I've been following it the last month because I like to listen to first-hand sources, primary sources, and hear from the dragon's mouth, not from somebody telling me what they think somebody says. So he's not insane. He thinks a little differently than a lot of people. His brain works a little differently than a lot of people, but he's just talking. He's talking what he wants to talk about, and it shouldn't be wrong, and more people should be doing it.
I don't have much to say, but I will say this. You know, they're calling, you know, Kanye West every single word in the book. They're not saying he's wrong. So take that for what you will.
As the representative of Gen X, I was aware of when Kanye was, you know, the best rapper that ever was, and shaping fashion world after that. And you know, it's one of those things. I'm enjoying watching the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dogs are not in that fight either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying something like, this may end badly, but at least it's going to be an entertaining ride till the end.
Right.
Like, that's pretty much where I'm
It's
at.
kind of like a dumpster fire, but
Yeah.
the dumpster is rolling downhill.
Yeah, I mean,
Alright,
the
good
one
crash,
thing,
pretty cool.
the one thing about him is he was in a very unique position to do something that really nobody else could, which is burst the door right open on the Irish. Just for the sake of posterity and that kind of thing. He's a black guy. He's a cultural icon, very famous. He's not necessarily going to appeal to the intellectuals, but he's going to bring a certain topic into the mainstream that nobody else could with relative impunity. I mean, he lost some money on it, obviously, but he doesn't care. And I don't know. Maybe that'll be. We'll have to be. It'll be something interesting to watch and see. We'll see what happens in the future. So that wraps up what we wanted to, get across and talk about today. It's always great to be able to come out to these events, have new people join us, have familiar faces join us, and just be a part of these things and get to have good fraternal weekends. And definitely doing these fireside chats is going to be something that I think we can sustain going forward, even if we have to put it on TV. But the vibe in here is nice. So if you guys are interested in becoming a part of our organization, reach out to us over social media. Send us an email. Recruitment's important. Recruitment is key. We want people who want to come on and contribute. Nobody does this full time. We all take time out of our schedule to make these things happen. We take money out of our pocketbooks to make these things happen because it matters. And we need movements like ours and like yours and others that are out there doing similar things to be active and to be pushing back, because there's a lot that we got to deal with. So send us an email, send us a message. Become a part of the movement. Follow us on social media, all that good stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, whatever all the YouTubers say. But I don't care if you do any of that, as long as you're out being a solid cultural force, because that's what we need more than anything. So appreciate you guys all tuning in. Appreciate you guys sitting down and chatting. And look forward to the next time we can do this. So God bless.
Good night.